Right, ladies and gentlemen, let's start the Cabinet Committee on Performance Improvement. It's 2 o'clock. Have apologies from Councillor Gooch, Turner, Edwards, Rear, Townley, and Officers Mike Kirby and Paul Bond are unfortunately unable to be with us. Have we any disclosure of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? No, thank you. Minutes of the meeting of the 9th of September. Everybody happy with those? Proposed? Seconder? Thank you. This takes us on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the Corporate Strategy Monitoring Report for Q2, and I'm going to turn to Donna to take us through it. Thank you.
Thank you. You may have noticed that the report is now reformatted to reflect the new corporate priorities. So it's now set out against the delivering better services, protecting our environment, supporting economic growth and caring for the vulnerable. We've got existing key performance indicators reported under these new corporate priorities, along with some service development information which actually contribute to the delivery of the priorities. So when I start to take you through the report, I will be asking for officers to provide some more detailed information about some of the information that's in here. So if we can skip to page 17 and go straight into the body of the report rather than me sort of repeating things. We're on delivering better services, so we're in Appendix A, delivering better services, and if I could ask John to just talk us through the indicators that are on page 17, please.
Thanks, Chair. From Q2, you'll see that certainly at the top part of the performance indicators, we are showing red, and these are to do with the 4-hour emergency and the 2 working days urgent. There's been, on the 2 hours we're fairly steady, but there has been a slight improvement in terms of the 2-day urgent. I think, you know, there's a context to these in the sense that the numbers that we're talking about are relatively small, and I know we've said this before, but if we're looking at actual numbers for these, if we look at them combined, we found 255 in total for the 2-day and the 4-hour, and out of that we attended to 220. So we're missing about 35, which is, you know, the problem with these when it is relatively low numbers. If we're looking at the 2 hours, there was 62, and we attended to 55, so that's 7 we've missed. It forms quite a big percentage, and that's one of the difficulties we've got with that. Sometimes that can be a system error, if I'm honest, whereby we have attended, but we don't input the information till the next day, but we can't backdate that. The system doesn't allow us to backdate it, so although whilst we've attended, we can't actually record that we have attended. So that can cause a slight issue on some of this. In terms of the 5-day, 10-day and 20-day, the 5-day, I think there's been a good increase in the percentage that we've attended there. Gone from the 70s well into the 80% now. So we're getting closer to that target. The 10-day and 20 days we're doing pretty well on. We are achieving targets. Probably the 10 and the 20 days are the areas where we are getting most reports and most faults, most defects are recorded in those areas. But we are doing reasonably well on those. Performance is pretty good. In general, I would say there's been a significant increase in the number of defects that are being reported both by the Report It system and through our own highway safety inspectors, and we're certainly seeing that. We are noticing that there is an increase in the number of defects, which at the moment, certainly the 10 and 20 day, we are coping with. We are moving towards winter, which can add additional problems in terms of having crews available, certainly if they're out gritting. But generally the performance is quite good. Street lighting wise, we're doing okay on those. We're performing, we're meeting targets. And I don't, whilst we are in the darker nights where we tend to get more requests for repairs, I still think we'll maintain that going forward.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions or points to raise? And it's good to see that the position is improving, that's for sure. But as you say, we're coming into the winter period, so it'll come under pressure again unnecessarily. Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make a comment. It's just a bit of echo there. About the actual numbers. I think we talked at a previous meeting about putting some absolute figures in, so we didn't have this confusion over percentages. So I totally understand what you're saying, that a relatively small number gives a big impact in percentages. But if we had, I think the numbers you said was sort of 36/42, as well as the percentage, if underneath you can actually have the absolute, then we get a feel for what that percentage means in absolute terms. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think that would be a useful addition.
I agree. So if we can take that as an action, that would be helpful. Thank you. So, thank you, John. Do you want to take us through the next bit, Donna?
Okay. The next item to talk about is sickness absence, and there has been a steady rise in the sickness absence rate per FTE. Although actually the 2021 figures are still slightly below the 2019 figures, if you look at the quarter, you compare the two quarters. During this quarter, we've got the number of new long-term absent cases has slowly declined from 183 to 114, and the top reasons still continue to be mental and behavioural disorders, which is well over a third of the days lost, and musculoskeletal absences, which is over 10%, followed by COVID. There's been a steady rise in the average number of days lost per COVID absence from an average of nearly 4 days in April to over 6 days in September. So we are monitoring the number of long COVID absences very closely, with HR providing support and guidance to the services for these cases. I'd also like to mention that the target, which is being reported for 21-22, is actually being reviewed at the moment by the services.
Thank you. Anybody got any points that they want to raise? I think if I just raise something, it would be interesting to have a comparator with other local authorities in terms of the sickness absences. Do you think we could have that for either outside of this meeting or to report on next time, just to get a feel for it, because it's interesting that the figure is going up, but the long-term absences are going down, which suggests something around the support arrangements for that, which would be good to understand as well. Thank you. Anybody got anything else they want to raise? No? So if you can take us through the next section of the report, please.
I'll carry on. Yes, the next item is about the revenue forecast outturn percentage variance to budget. I won't go through that. It is reported elsewhere, and it's really for context in this performance report. So looking at the additional service developments, we've actually invited John along to talk a little bit about the transformation programme, which is our improvement journey. So if I could invite John to speak now.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see that within the developments highlighted here, the first line is initiating the programme, which has been reshaped during the pandemic. Clearly, when the improvement journey following the concept and shape phase in early 2020 was set out, a number of the priorities, at least a couple of those long-term priorities, which were around flexible working and accommodation and the introduction of Teams and 365, were seen as items which might happen further back in the programme. They've been brought forward due to the requirements from our COVID response. So we're now reshaping the programme to take account of that and to pick up new priorities as well. There is that continued technology rollout that our digital colleagues are doing, and the replacement of Oracle, the ERP system, with Oracle Fusion is a core part of that, enabling staff and customers to get better data and information interaction with us, and hopefully enabling this committee as well to have really high quality information in terms of some key performance areas. We also have ongoing programs of change in education insurance services and adult services, which will contribute significantly to that transformation. 3 Conversations model is a very good example of that. We are underway now with a review of the HR Skills Learning Development Service to ensure that we've got the skills and capacity required to drive an ambitious transformation programme and to support our staff in the changes that will be required. And a couple of the other key bits there, we've the refreshed staff survey results, early results are now in, and we'll be providing further analysis on that in the next few weeks. Obviously the other part of this is the ways of working and flexible working, and we continue to make progress with the pilot on that.
Anybody got any points that they want to raise on? There's a lot of activity going on there, John. I suppose the question for me is how we're communicating all of that the totality of the programme to staff and to managers so that they're fully engaged in it. Could you perhaps give us a little bit on that?
Yeah, that's a current priority actually. So working with comms, we are working up a refreshed plan, and that will essentially run in 3 phases. So the first phase, I think in the next month or so, will be outlining to staff the peer review findings. Building on that, we will then get into some of the improvement journey comms in the new year. So those will begin to work through in December, January and February as a pilot, as a programme. It is really clear that we didn't get the chance to launch this because as the report landed, the world went into lockdown. So that is a priority for us now, and actually on that basis we did recruit a comms lead for this work specifically yesterday.
Councillor Rickett.
Thank you. Just a short follow-up on that. Is that comms plan including any lessons learned? Because we've been trying to communicate this journey for quite a period of time through some difficult circumstances. But it'd be useful if you had some reflective views on what have we done well, what would we seek to avoid doing next time around. So hopefully when the comms plan goes out next time, we absolutely land this, so we're not in this cycle again.
Yeah, I can see that. I think I differ slightly in that I don't think we've communicated the improvement journey. I don't think we have done that. We've got lessons to learn from the OWOW elements of that, certainly. But in terms of the improvement journey itself, we've not really communicated that. It's been socialised with members and with senior leadership team, really. We've not gone further down, and that's the bit that we really need to kick on with, I think. But there are certainly lessons we can learn from the improvement journey, the ways of working comms. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody got anything else they want to raise? No, thank you. Thanks very much, John. So, Donna, take us through the next section.
Okay, so we're now on page 21 and protecting our environment. The item here is the percentage of recycling, reuse and composted. We did have a full report on waste at the last meeting, and there's no real significant changes, so I won't go through that. And oops, sorry, I can see a question.
Riggett.
Thank you. When I was looking at this and reflecting on the conversation we had about highways and some absolute figures a few moments ago, I don't know whether this is one of those sections that would benefit from some absolutes, because if it's showing the percentage going down but actual numbers are going up and there's other sections at play that aren't part of this agenda that are affecting that number, I feel it might just be useful to see some actuals and whether that's by... Because I was reading the comments about the change in behaviour, and I myself have not been able to recycle all the cardboard through just changes of working practice, and are taking that to recycling centres. But I'd be interested to see some data that says, is that actually what we're doing generally across the county, or is too much of that suddenly ending up in general waste because not everybody can make those journeys? So, and it might just help us try and turn that trend around.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I think that would be helpful. So if we could take an action, actually, just to think, I think it would be really helpful for any general reader, actually, just to see the totality of what we're doing as well. So if we can think about not just a sort of internal audience, but an external audience, so that we set it all in context, I think that would be helpful. Thank you. So do we move on to supporting economic growth?
Just looking at if anyone, there's some additional service developments against the protecting our environment, which my mic just went off, which talks about the carbon reduction and the LED street lighting conversion, etc., and the Pass the Planet Pass the Planet campaign. I don't know if anybody wants to go through this in any detail, or shall I just skip through? Skip through? Yep, skip through, fine. So we're now on supporting economic growth, as you said, page 23. And can I invite Andy Walker, please?
Thank you. So the customary 3 indicators on supporting economic growth, 1 on our investments through Rosebud and 2 on the activity of the Growth Hub boost. In the second quarter, the level of investments we made through Rosebud continued to be disappointing. This is largely on the basis that the debt market in Lancashire is hugely suppressed on the back of the amount of bounce back loans and COVID business loans that businesses in the county were able to access through the COVID period. Whilst that has been a real boon in terms of buoying those companies through that period, as I say, the demand and the equity position and indeed the indebtedness position of Lancashire businesses means there's very little appetite for the types of mid-scale debt loan that Rosebud provides. Hopefully, members will feel that as a compensation for that, we've gone back to our fund managers, accepted that their target for the year will be significantly lower, but also asked them to reduce their management fees in line with that reduction in target. So we are saving money as opposed to giving them the full amount for managing a far smaller portfolio. In terms of general business inquiries through Boost, the level of inquiries remains very high, and in the third indicator you see that we're well on target for the 200 new businesses established. We have seen a renaissance in people coming forward and the levels of enterprise within the local economy, and people are genuinely interested in taking the opportunity now to explore enterprise. That's not yet showing through in terms of the job creation within those companies, though it's probably gratifying to know that we haven't seen huge levels of people not returning from furlough in the county. So I think there's a measure of companies reabsorbing people who they previously had on furlough as opposed to taking on new staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Riggett.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Andy and his team and endorse what he said. Recently, earlier this week, I had the opportunity to join one of the sessions run by Andrew Levin and Andy's programmes, and it was really enthusiastic and engaging, as I'm sure you're not surprised to hear, but it was really, really positive as well. And I think I've said this before at previous meetings, and I'll continue to say this. I think the messaging Andy's given is very important. I think it's also important that we reflect. I see part of our role is to reflect and re-engineer our solutions and our advice as to what is needed, rather than keep trying to push something we had agreed, but that isn't what our economy needs, what our local businesses need. If we have to move and evolve, as we did through the pandemic, to offer other services, that will give us the greater outcome when we're looking at this in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, rather than a quarter-by-quarter position. So I will keep saying that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that flexibility and that ability to change quickly is absolutely vital, and we can do it, so we need to just keep on doing it. Anybody else got any? Yes, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. It was just at the bottom of page 24, where it says the annual report scheduled to be confirmed on those 4 items. Just wondered if there was any sort of date when that is going to be available for that information? Is it for the next meeting or later on?
That's something we've been working on. Can I just defer to Michael to ask whether you've had any conversations about this with...
Yeah, so we're reviewing the reports. I mean, in reformatting this report into the new corporate priorities, we are reviewing whether these reports do fit against those priorities and the sort of work task within those. We do have a corporate performance board which Mike Kirby chairs, and we will be looking at this schedule at that next meeting, which is in January, looking to put a year programme together to bring these reports.
Thanks very much. So, if we could move on to educational attainment.
Yes, there is that. So the next section with new information in is around the number of visits to libraries, etc. So if I could just ask Dave Carr to pick that up, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I suppose the first thing to say is around the targets. So when we reported to the committee last time, we were off target on quite a number of these indicators. We've taken stock in the context of the pandemic and the world we're now in, and put within the report a set of what we still think are challenging targets, but more realistic. I think what you see in there is a picture of recovery. So if you look at the number of visits to libraries, there were 393,000 in the last quarter, so we're up on quarter one, so the direction of travel is a good one. In terms of the PNet sessions, so that's the public access computers, again, up around that has started to increase. Number of events, again, it's increasing, but some of the limitations that we've got due to COVID are impacting on that. I think what I would say is that we've prioritised that volunteer capacity where it's making best impact. So the home library service, as an example, has got the most significant numbers of volunteers sustaining that. E-downloads is interesting because if you look at this year, we're already way above where we were in 2019-20. So it's levelled off a bit in terms of the e-download take up. But what seems to be happening is that people have got it, they like it, they're sticking with it. So I think it's kind of supplementary to our kind of physical library offer, and hopefully that will stay with us as we go forward. So like I say, I think it's generally a positive picture and improving performance from last quarter.
Thank you. Anybody got any points? Oh, Councillor Ali.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to go back to page 25 on educational attainment, and maybe if the information won't be here now, but if you could send that through separately. But you've got performance indicators and it says percentage secondary pupils offered one of the top 3 preferences. It's as a county. Just wonder if this information is available by district, or because that would make a difference, because it's very difficult to look at it this way, and the same for primary schools. And then on page 26 you've got proportion of children excluded from school, but also if there's indication of how many kids are not in school, not because they've been excluded but because they haven't got school places. If that could be made available through you, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much. That would be helpful to see it by district as well. And as you say, it's that sort of numbers position which is the important bit.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly touch on page 27, the number of library events organised, and pleased to see that increasing, because that was, I know how hugely important that is to communities and to library staff and to the service as a whole. And Peter will know I'm still chair of the Friends of Exton Library, my local library, and actually in a couple of weeks we've got our first event post-COVID actually taking place, so slowly that is starting to feed through, and it's really positive and everybody's really excited to see it happening. So long may that continue.
Anything else from anybody? No? So we will now move on to, I think we're on to caring for the vulnerable, page 30.
Thank you. So this is actually back to Dave Carr again because it starts with the children and family services.
Okay, thank you. So the first one is about a number of children and young people in that targeted children and family wellbeing where their outcomes or their needs are successfully met. We're on 70% for quarter one. We've gone down to 69% for quarter two. There's something about August in terms of parental engagement sometimes where actually that impacts on our data each year. I think we're quite positive about the targets that we've got and whether we will achieve them during the year. There's been a bit of a conversation, a bit like the libraries, about actually whether we need to have a revisit of some of these targets and potentially stretch them a bit more, but that's an ongoing conversation we're having with the service. The second indicator is about percentage of children looked after actually living in Lancashire, and as with quarter one we're above target on that. We continue to work with our providers. We're continuing to shape our in-house provision for children's social care, and wherever possible and appropriate, because it's not appropriate for all young people, we are looking to place our young people in Lancashire.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Any questions on that bit? That's a continuing good performance. It has been for a long time, but we appreciate how much effort that takes. There's some real challenges there. Thank you.
Yes, so the next section is actually, I want to bring in Tony Pounder because it's looking at adult social care.
Sorry. Okay, I've been given the wrong instructions to Sue as well, so at least you know. I've made the error first. In terms of these three indicators, you'll see that we're making steady progress towards the target on achieving safeguarding outcomes. This particular measure is one that is a tough one, and we actually know that 97% or so of people feel that most of their outcomes are achieved, but there's often some kind of gap, and as I think committee will have heard from me before, sometimes that's because some of the solutions people are seeking may be unattainable by our intervention. Might want the family member or some other incident not to have occurred, and we can't always put those things right, but what it indicates is we are generally satisfying people with making them safer in at levels which is comparable with other authorities, and certainly moving that forward. I think that service is experiencing two things at the minute. One is certainly a higher rate of referrals and alerts which are coming particularly from the care home sector, where as many people will experience if they've got family in those situations, it's much harder to visit and therefore much more kind of closed environments compared to what may have occurred in the past. So some concerns which have sometimes been highlighted as a result of that on a greater scale than may have been before. So the team is very busy, but the service is also in the process of resuming its transformation. So there was a major programme to try and streamline and improve the focus of that team, which had to be stalled to a degree from the start of the pandemic whilst that team was focused in its attentions elsewhere. So positive news there. I think it will get better. I think in a year's time, if that steady progress and the transformation beds down, I think you'll see a really positive picture around that as well. On the other two areas, which is around the judgments of CQC in relation to care homes and community services, well, the position on community services remains very positive. Both the independent sector and the services that the County Council runs itself are exemplary levels, and kind of as high levels as you'll find in any authority in the country. I think where we are starting to see some concerns is obviously in the care home sector. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is fundamentally the care home sector has actually faced the most tremendous challenges over the last 2 years, and I can't think of many tougher places except maybe hospitals themselves to work in that environment. But what that's also meant is that CQC, who also haven't been going into those situations, have been focusing their attentions on those homes where somebody's raised a concern or alert. So they've not got the capacity or the inclination to go and look at services which they know to be good and not hearing anything about, to see where they're faring. Equally, they're not going back and reviewing services or inspecting services that they last visited a couple of years ago when we were requiring improvement. So they're inevitably looking at homes which they've heard have got some concerns, and so all I'm saying is it's not surprising that therefore the position is slightly deteriorating. It does mean therefore that the quality team is working ever harder to try and get to grips with that. I think the other subsidiary point in this, which is, you know, as a council, we run a proportion of those homes is about 4 or 5%, 16 homes. We've also seen that the 3 requires improvement from before the pandemic. We've not been able to get those reviewed, but we've had 2 further homes during the recent months go to requires improvement as well, and they're many of the same issues as we had before. So it's a real challenge, I think, that we can see. 3 of the homes are ones which have been particularly under the cosh, not just ordinary care homes, but care homes that are providing residential rehabilitation during the pandemic period. That means people are going in for short periods of time and under huge pressures, but that's not to excuse what actually should be consistently better performance. It's just to acknowledge these are, certainly 3 of those 5 care homes are delivering some of the most demanding and challenging services that we would see anywhere in the country, really.
Thanks very much for that update. Anybody got any points to raise? No? Okay, thank you. So that takes us on to, I don't know who's doing adults with learning disabilities. Is that you as well, Tony?
Yeah, just to say we're making small but steady progress as we realised during the large pandemic, much harder to secure jobs, but that is now starting to change. In fact, there's a shortage of people to enter the labour force, and so I think there's endless opportunities, and that team is now remobilised to do what it's intended to do rather than diverted as we had for much of the last 2 years onto other matters. So currently we've got 71 people we know are in employment. To hit our target and put us on a par with many other authorities, we need to find about another 34 employment opportunities for people, and I think over the next year or so we'll make considerable progress even if we don't quite achieve that.
Yeah, that would be good to hear. Thank you. So, does that take us on to page 34? Is there anything that we want to raise on that bit?
I just wondered whether Sackthie wanted to say anything about the progress in the additional metrics that are being considered for inclusion in future reports, because I know that you've whether you want to mention the Public Health Annual Report, etc. Don't know, it's up to you.
Thank you. Members will remember that we presented the status of public health outcomes last time. We have got another meeting coming up early in December with colleagues in the Cabinet, and we are engaging with wider members as well. My annual report's due end of this year, early next year, but we do need to start flowing KPIs and outcome measures through this forum, this report, which is really in progress. That's I'll leave it there. Yeah, thank you.
Right, we should follow that up. Is there anything else you want to raise on the report itself, Donna?
No, I'm moving on to page 34. It is back to Tony again. This is caring for vulnerable people, so we kind of expect that. Oops, Sue.
It's me that's going to do this. So just in terms of the numbers of older people age 65 and over who were still at home 91 days after discharge from hospital, who've gone into reablement or rehabilitation services. Currently our performance is that 341 of the 400 people who were discharged at the end of the quarter were still at home 91 days later. So whilst that does give us a good percentage of 85.2%, it is above both the national and North West average. But to enable us to kind of hit our expected LCC target of 87.4%, we would need an additional 8 people to be recorded as still being at home 91 days later. It's an indicator that does fluctuate with seasonal variation, and we are seeing increasing numbers of people with more complex needs going through that service. However, we're undertaking quite a lot of work with our reablement service to be able to continue to kind of achieve those really good outcomes and help people stay at home for as long as possible, and therefore we'll get closer to meeting that target. We are mindful, though, that the pressures that we're seeing across the care market might also at times impact on kind of timely move into longer term care from reablement, and also the opportunity for some people to remain at home. So whilst it's not a big number, there's still a lot of work for us to do on that. The proportion of adults with learning disabilities who live in their own home, we're reporting really good performance on that. So we've got at the moment, we've got a 90% performance on that, and that equates to 3,080 people of the 3,388 known working age learning disability adults that we've got at the end of the period. So that is an overachievement of 166 people known to be living in their own home. But we do know that that's not necessarily a real improvement. There is something around our data capture on that. So there's kind of a heavy caveat with that KPI. The number of adults and older people receiving long-term services supported in the community. To hit our own target, we would need to be at 11,687 people. We're currently at 11,645, so we do need another 42 people to meet that KPI. So we've still got some work to do to meet that target, but we are broadly maintaining our improved performance in that area. Got a lot of actions within adult social care that will certainly help with that. So some of the transformation programs that we've got, such as the 3 conversations model, these will support our ambition to enable more people to remain in their own home. But again, need to be mindful of the ongoing pressures of the pandemic and some of our challenges around securing home care for people kind of quickly enough and in sufficient quantity. So it's hard to predict if we'll be able to kind of achieve our indicator target this year, but that's clearly our ambition to keep working towards that. The number of permanent admissions to residential and nursing homes for people aged 18 to 64. Currently our number per 100,000 population is 96, and that gives us a ratio of 13.3 per 100,000. So that current performance is just slightly better than our target of 13.6, and we're continuing to look at all possible options to support people to remain at home where we can avoid an admission into a care home. And then permanent admissions for people aged 65 plus. Again, currently during the year we've got a number of 1,693, which gives us a ratio of 662.2 per 100,000. It's currently within our target of 600 to 680, but we are realistic that this will remain a challenge for us to maintain that performance. Given the kind of the rise in the number of people being discharged from hospital into care homes and the ongoing pressures in the home care market, there's a potential as well that we might see a further rise in direct admissions from hospital, because we know the NHS are block booking care home beds, but we're working really closely with our health partners to kind of jointly maintain a focus on supporting people to return home wherever possible. Also, we've seen recently a number of people who may well have avoided care homes during the pandemic for various reasons, for themselves or for the people that they care for, and people are starting to return to residential settings, which might also impact on our KPI.
Thank you. Anybody got any points that they want to raise? Thank you for those contextual figures. That really helps when you give us the numbers rather than the percentages are good, but the numbers are also really help to set it in context. So thank you for that. Anybody want to raise any points? It looks a good position actually in the circumstances. Donna, do you want to take us through the report, please?
Yes, unless Sakthi wants to say something, I was just going to say that the NHS health check programme is a public health priority and it's restarting. You don't want to say anything, that's fine. Yeah, so that's restarting. I think probably that's as much as I want to say on this report, unless anybody has a burning desire to go through the service developments. Can I just draw everybody's attention to the fact we've got a list of the National Award nominations that the County Council's been shortlisted for since June 2020 as Appendix B, and I think that's a phenomenal list. I don't propose to go through it, but I just wanted to draw your attention to it.
Great, and thank you for that. And yes, it's really helpful to have that, and it is a phenomenal list. You're quite right. So well done to everybody who's involved. Anybody got any other points to raise? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo what you're saying. The list is really exceptional, and I think it's worthwhile just to acknowledge and thank officers for reformatting this to align with the corporate priorities. I think with the work that you're going to do in sort of developing new metrics and KPIs and things moving forward, I think that will make this a really good document to work towards. I noticed there was one deliberate error, which I don't think anyone's pointed out yet. On the front page, on page 13, the corporate priorities are actually 2021 to 2025, not 24. So I thought I'd just point that out for accuracy purposes, but thank you very much for reformatting this.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Your eye for detail is well received. Okay, so we'll move on to, thank you for all the contributions there. So move on to item 5, which is the Corporate Risk and Opportunity Register. Are you taking us through that, Donna?
I will have to, yes,
you assume that everybody has read it, and just bring out the highlights and if there are any questions.
That's fine, yes. So this is the first time that this Cabinet Committee has actually reviewed the Corporate Risk and Opportunity Register because it was suspended as a result of the pandemic. So, and this report is also presented to our Corporate Management team and the Audit, Risk and Governance Committee. So following a review of the Directorate risks, CMT actually have included an additional risk on the corporate register that focuses on demand for client-led services, together with some opportunities. I think you should have all had a link to a vodcast, I think it was, which describes the process. So I'm not going to go through that. You'll see that we've got in Appendix B, we've got the summary risk profile, which shows you on a page the risks, the target dates, the RAG rating, and who's got accountability for the actions. So that helps this overall programme. We've got the risks are listed here. I can't see any point in me reading them all out. Can I just ask if people have any questions having looked through the report?
I'm just going to bring in Dave Carr, who wants to comment on something.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, and forgive me, I haven't got the page, but there was a risk around SEND within there in our delivery of the SEND improvement plan. At the time we were pulling this report together, we hadn't had our 12-month monitoring visit from DFE and CQC. That took place at the end of September, and they were satisfied with the progress that we were making. So if we were to redo the risk register at this point in time, it would be a little different in terms of the progress.
And yeah, I was going to mention that actually myself, because that was that's another phenomenal performance on SEND, so we should record that in the minutes here as well. Tony?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment as well on the risk which is impact on community services from demand management, because I guess how that's framed really as a risk at the minute is very much in terms of budget pressures and poor outcomes, and I think councillors will know from the press, if not from reports, that we've got the most tremendous workforce shortages as well across health and social care. So that is exacerbating concerns. Even if we've got the money, we're not always able to get the staff, and that's true in the health service as much as it is true for those services which we commission. So it's just to report that we are certainly on the home care front, and Cabinet, really welcome their support in the last round of Cabinet meetings, where I think you endorsed an approach of looking in a fairly urgent way with the current home care providers to see if we can alleviate some of that risk over the next 4 or 5 months as winter, when things are at their most acute, to see if we can actually at least stop the deterioration in the workforce situation and kind of ensure we've got viability over the winter.
Councillor Vincent.
My only point, Chairman, is I'm surprised to see it here at all, because this is normally an audit and risk function. And I appreciate it's already been to audit and risk, but certainly the organisations I've been in before, districts and county previously, it seemed to be an audit and risk issue, not an issue for this group.
I think I agree. I think the detailed consideration of the risk register lies with audit and risk, but we did ask for a summary of the position. I think it was the last meeting, wasn't it? And in many ways, maybe the summary of the position would suffice. There's a lot of detail in this report, and then the detail can be dealt with by the audit and risk people. Okay. If no other points on that, I think we'll move on to item 6, which is the Statutory Social Care Annual Report, Complaints and Customer Feedback. And I think Angela Esslingen is going to take us through that. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for that. My name's Angela Esslinger. I manage all complaints and appeals for the council. I'm going to take you through the statutory annual report, which covers 2 procedures. Complaints for children are under different legislation than complaints for adults. So I will take you briefly through the summaries of the report, starting on page 89, which is the adult social care feedback. The good news for 2000, we're talking about last financial year, so this is a historical document to a large extent, but complaints actually reduced from 2019 2020 to last financial year from 536 to 420 complaints in adult social care. Adult social care is very high pressured. It has had year-on-year increases of complaints for many, many years, but this is the first time it's reduced, which ordinarily would be a cause for celebration, but there is an explanation in that complaints were paused during the last financial year because of the pandemic, so we weren't actually taking any complaints for 3 years. Three months would have been nice to be 3 years. So as a result, we had reductions, and those reductions are reflected nationally, and they're also reflected in the children's figures as well. Bucking the trend, however, and some more good news, is that compliments increased by 8%. We've got some new processes to highlight compliments, and as a result, it's the recording really that has increased for the last financial year. So, what do people complain about? Well, we're on page 90. On graph 7, you'll see that there are 2 spikes in the graph for the most common themes of complaints. The first is support planning, which is on entry, and the reviewing processes as well for adult social care. And so that's where there's contact with us social workers. And also about finances. There is one thing that tends to be our disadvantage, in that healthcare is provided free, but social care is charged, and that tends to up our complaints about adult social care. I would like to talk about the learning for adult social care, because there's no point making a complaint unless we actually take that in terms of organisational learning to ensure that what has happened or what's gone wrong in terms of an upheld complaint isn't repeated again. And to support that, that philosophy, there's now a shared learning panel in adult social care, which is chaired by the principal social worker, and that identifies the themes and the root causes of complaints and helps to cascade the learning across the council to make sure that what has gone wrong in Burnley doesn't get repeated in Lancaster or anywhere else. So the learning points are quite extensive, and they go from pages 91 through to page 93. I'm not going to go into them in any depth, but they are mainly surrounding communication. There's no rocket science involved in any of the mistakes that we highlight in this report. It's mainly to do with just improving our communication with complainants, both service users and carers, because obviously busy social workers can be so hard pressed and so busy that sometimes just communicating the basic facts can fall by the wayside. Compliments on graph 8 are mainly about equipment and adaptations year upon year. We find that people are absolutely delighted with the support that we can give them to help people remain at home. On page 94, Ombudsman complaints have reduced as well, reflecting the national reductions reflected by the pandemic and the pause, going from 62 to 44 separate inquiries. And of everything that has gone to the Ombudsman from the closed complaints in the County Council last financial year, there was only an uphold rate of about 15%, which actually isn't too bad at all. Children and young people, we're now on page 96 and graph 10. You'll see that there's been again a reduction in statutory complaints, and compliments have also reduced. That's an area really for children's social care an area of need to try and pick up on the lost compliments. Of the good news for children's social care is that 45% there's been an increase in early resolution complaints where fast action is taken by social workers to resolve complaints when they're brought to the attention of the council. So that's gone up from 45% to 52% of all complaints, which is positive. In terms of the learning for children's social care, again, it's some very similar themes to adults. It's a lot of the learning reflects communication or miscommunication by social workers, or not communicating adequately with families who are impacted by social work decisions. On page 100, it shows that non-statutory complaints, which are mainly complaints about the inclusion service, they have increased. That bucks the trend, but we think that's to do with new processes being in place to capture those complaints which weren't in place the year before. So that we think is the reason for that. And overall, the amount of inquiries of closed complaints that have gone to the Ombudsman have reduced from 74 to 55, which a very small proportion were upheld, in this case 10% for all of children's and families and education decisions. So this is where I ask if there are any questions, and anybody can put me on the spot.
Anybody want to raise any particular points? Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you. I was just picking up the complaint, the section where it talks about the content of emails shared with customers and unprofessional dialogue. And obviously we're talking at a time a couple of years ago where you say it's a historical. I'm thinking now that we're using Teams and email and all the other sort of IT and digital, it's just getting that message across about all messages should be of professional quality, and it's just getting that message out. I think from a use of digital services needs to make sure that that is to a professional level across all levels in all circumstances.
Agree with that.
It's a comment rather than a question.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that as well. And that communications thing, so the processes and the systems underlying it are quite complicated on both sides, adults and children's, and the skill of being able to explain that to people who are using our services, whether as users or as carers or supporters, is really important. So I echo that. We need to put much more effort into making sure those communications are right. And I just wondered how we performed generally on our complaints compared to other authorities.
Yeah, we have done some benchmarking with other authorities, some big authorities like Kent and Hampshire, and we found that actually we are performing as the fourth largest council in the country would perform. We come under the numbers of the large councils, but over the numbers of the small councils and the smaller councils. So we are overall, I think, as memory serves, it's about 10th down in the league table of highest complaints, but you would expect our complaints to be large because we have we serve large numbers of people. But again, I would like to reiterate and take the opportunity to reiterate the fact that it's only 1% of complaints of adult social care and children's social care contact that actually results in complaints, and 99% of the time we don't get any complaints at all.
Anything else from anybody on that particular subject? Thank you, Angela. Thank you. So, item 7 on the agenda is urgent business, and we haven't got any. So, our next meeting is scheduled in the new year for Thursday, the 10th of March, 2022. So, thank you everybody for all your contributions, and for anybody goodbye to anyone who's zooming in. Thank you.